Hi, and welcome to BISP podcast. I'm Chloe, and I'm in Year 12 at BISP, and I'm joined by Armaan, who is a student athlete at our school. So, welcome, Armaan, and would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you. Yes, as you said, I'm a student athlete here at BISP. I'm in year 13 and I'm a high performance swimmer. And I've just finished the application process to the United States to a Division III institute, Tufts University. And I applied as a student athlete, so I went through the coach and I also did the normal admissions application.
Okay, and it leads me to my question. So, why university? Why apply at all, really?
Right. Well, that's always been something that my parents have, pushed me towards since I was younger. I mean, it's always just been a given goal for me that I would go to university after school. Both my parents were fortunate enough to do university as well. But I will be the first to do it in the US, and so this process was new to me as well, and to my parents. But otherwise, I wanna pursue a career in further education, and eventually, hopefully, become a surgeon in the future.
Okay, so I guess some of the inspiration came from your parents, but also your fellow swimmers. Did you, receive any information from them? Because I know a few of them went to the US as well. Did you get any advice from them?
Definitely. A bunch of the swimmers that graduated in the previous years, they've gone on to the US, to some very prestigious universities as well. And it helped because some of them went to high Division I universities, which are more athletics based, and some of them have been to Division III, which are more academic based. And learning from them and talking to them and gaining their advice, it's helped me make my decision on where I want to go, which is to a Division III institute, which is more academic based, more like BISP, which is, as I call it, a student athlete, whereas a Division I is like an athlete student, where your athletics comes before your academics.
Right. So, how do you avoid your biases? You just mentioned Division I, Division III. As humans, we're very into top hierarchies, and it's a bit like Cinderella, isn't it? You want to walk up the steps to Harvard, and to an extent, we can all do that in different places. So, how did you avoid your differing to more well-known universities, and how did you take the path less taken?
Well, I think inevitably there will be a bias because it's all about what you want to do and where you want to go, and I think that's not a bad thing. But when you are looking for universities, you have to start off by thinking, obviously, do you want to go to university? That's the first question, and then the second question is what do you want to why do you want to go to university? Like, is there a higher education you're seeking? Is it just because you want to meet new people and travel to a different country? Is it because you want to become the president one day? Is it because you want to become a surgeon, astronaut? All these things you take into a factor, and then you have to also think about how long you're going to spend in university, because there's further education. And I think avoiding biases is not really, well, when you're searching for universities, it's possible to avoid biases, but you have to also narrow your search down, and that means, like, with what you want to do, you have to find universities that are going to give you what you want. So that may be a Harvard, that may be somewhere in Alaska that you probably never heard of, but it might give you what you need. And so when searching for universities or when going through this process, you have to think about staying in the middle, staying neutral. Of course, you keep in mind your aspirations and your goals. Say you really want to go to Harvard, don't write that off just because it's Harvard and because, like, it's a cliche.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that there are other universities that are less known that might be better suited for you than someone else who might also want to go to Harvard.
Right. And that's an excellent point, that you have to take the path less taken and search deeper, to find the less well-known universities. But how did you even find these less well-known universities in America? Because we're constantly exposed to, in the media, at school, the big names like Yale, Harvard, Princeton, you name it. So how did you find these less well-known universities?
Well, through a lot of research. I mean, that's the simplest answer. But, we have great facilities here where they offer university counselors who help us tremendously in their own time, school time. So Miss Nolan Jackson was a big help. But they are only a starting point. You have to do the research in your own time. And that means, looking up. So you search up like specific fields, right? You search up, best universities in the US for biology, best universities in the US for engineering. And then you look at the top universities, and those are basically what you're aiming for. Most of these might be big names, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, as you mentioned, but you might be surprised to find, University of Chicago in there, or University of Illinois, or something like that. And they might stand out at you, and don't write them off immediately, because they might be the top or the leading institutions in those fields.
Right.
And so that's why I think your previous question about biases was good, because you do need to have some biases. You need to look for what you want. You can't just look at the best university and say, oh, I want to go to that one. You need to narrow your field of search and go deeper into what you want. And that's why I feel university application is a big challenge, because a lot of people don't know what they want to do, and therefore people don't know where to look. People just aim for the highest or the best institutions that are named. Yeah.
So I'm a golfer, and I'm not a particularly good one because I started quite late. I have a high handicap of about 17, and I would say I'm a better student than a golfer, sadly. But what would your advice be to somebody who is really considering doing sport, not necessarily at a high level in university, but still wants to take it on as well as their academics?
Right. Well, the great thing about the US and as well as the UK, I don't know about a lot of other places, but they offer sports at most universities, and I don't mean in a division capacity. But there's a lot of club sports, and so after you apply to the university, after you get in, you can sign up for these activities, and then you can be trained and do it as exercise. However, it's a little different when you want to do it at a division level, because the NCAA, the coaches over there, they recruit their athletes before the application process or before you've even been admitted, and therefore it's a little earlier process. But even if, like for you want to play golf in university, usually what you would do is you would get to the university after you've applied, right before your term starts, and you'd sign up for that activity. Yeah. Or you'd find a club that's associated with the university, and then you'd get to train with them and play any competitions that they are eligible for. But you wouldn't be playing any tournaments on the like national level.
Right. So it's really just different experiences at different levels, right? Because you can be in a high division and have somewhat less of a variety of the clubs you're doing, and at a lower level maybe you can do more of a variety of things. And to swim at such a high level and also maintain your academic standard, do you think on your part that's a bit of a sacrifice to the university experience, we would say?
Well, I actually think that it's a great avenue for me to get into university, because it exposes me to a team, right? And in university, it's unfamiliar territory, and it's a new place. It's foreign to us, especially coming from Thailand. And therefore, I think, being part of that team already gives me a sense of community and gives me a platform to explore and to get to know people more. And I think that's why it's good for me. But, there definitely will be sacrifices. I do have to travel for competitions. I do have to give up free time for training and stuff like that. But I feel like that's always been a part of me since I've been growing up, especially now being at BISP as a student athlete. I have to make the same sacrifices, and that's why I think pursuing swimming in university was good for me, because it's already so familiar. But it's also much different in university, because the school schedule obviously isn't the same. I don't know the specifics of it, but you don't have classes every day. You won't have classes from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so there is a lot more time for you to juggle things around.
Okay. And in this process, how do you know what is best for you? And are there any particular countries to focus into? I know you have to go into this process with a really open mindset. You know, the four corners of the globe, you know, you've got to be open, right? But how do you narrow down due to your instincts and not what other people have done, not what other people say, this might be good for you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think what impacted me the most on my decision was my own personal experience. I've been fortunate enough to travel to the United States because I have cousins there.
Okay.
So I've stayed there for a while and I've experienced the environment. But you know, I haven't looked at other I haven't focused on other universities as in the UK, Canada, etc. Even in Asia. And I think the best way to figure out where you want to go is personal experience. However, I understand that there's a lot of people that lack this or haven't had the opportunities to explore these different areas, and so it might be difficult. And therefore, you have to rely on research. And by research, I don't mean, you know, like statistics or facts or something like that.
What you type into
exactly.
Google.
I mean, like, go watch videos about, you know, take a tour of Italy, take a tour of, you know, something like that. Just go explore, look at the fun things to do in places. But also, instead of narrowing your search to just the United States, as I said earlier, for like, you know, engineering or biology, open up your search to global universities. So say, which is the best universities in the world for biology, engineering, maths, etc. And then that can really open your field of vision, because you might see that the best school for English is somewhere in Germany, or the best school for English, it might be in the UK, it may be in the US. You know, you never know. And then best school for zoology is in Africa. And so that may open up your perspective a lot. And then I think that's a good way to start, instead of just focusing on the United States. But for me, I was already set on going to the United States, and therefore I was able to focus more intensely on just that one country.
Okay, so you kind of had a rough idea all the time that you were intending to go to the United States.
Yeah.
But what about if somebody didn't have a clue where they wanted to go, and you know, they have an idea of what they want to study maybe, but they have only lived in a certain country, haven't been abroad much? Then how do they, you know, direct themselves to know where they want to go to university?
Well, specifically from BISP, it's a really good thing to talk to your university counselor, because they have been to so many places and they obviously know a lot about universities, not just in the United States but everywhere else as well. And then for someone who hasn't been, you know, who hasn't traveled a lot, who hasn't experienced a lot of different cultures, or I mean, they may just want to think about staying in that local country, in that familiar environment. But if you do want to explore an international option, like I said again, primary research, you know, asking people who have been outside, not necessarily about universities, but the place itself. Asking people, I mean, think about what kind of weather you want. I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to be in a tropical environment? Do you want to be somewhere really cold, somewhere really hot all the time? So that's a good thing. That was also a factor for me, deciding, you know, East Coast, West Coast, North, South.
Right. Yeah. It's a huge country.
Exactly.
It's about 4 countries in one, really.
Yeah. So even on a global scale, looking at what weather you want to experience year round, that may narrow it down your search without you even knowing it.
Right.
So I think that's a good way to start. Weather, then you go into what kind of environment you want, people, place. Yeah.
Right. And as you say, that ties into research, you know, knowing what you want and having a look around. Right. So let's flip the coin here. And so you had your heart set on going to the United States, and of course you're an avid swimmer. But did you have an alternate route? you know, if this plan didn't go as expected, did you have, as we say, a plan B in case things didn't go quite as you expected?
Right. Well, I feel like there wasn't that much of a plan B as in instead of university, because I've always had my mindset on going to university. So even though I didn't have a backup plan if any university didn't work out, I have plan Bs for the universities that I want to go to. So instead of just finding one university and focusing intensely on that, putting all my eggs in one basket, I've looked at a wide range of universities in different locations in the United States. I've also looked at some universities in Canada and the UK. If any of the United States universities don't work out, but it's not sensible just to put all your eggs into one basket and look at just one university, because there's a high probability that that university might not work out, even though you can be the top student, top athlete, and you may not get in. That's just unfortunately how universities work.
Yeah.
It's difficult. So for me, my plan B was looking at other universities. So I've already applied to my aspiration university, but it's a good idea to have moderate and then easy universities to get into, and that you can figure out through research as well, through the application requirements, through the grade requirements, the level of university it's at, and also cost of attendance. I think that's a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Cost. That may also narrow down your search, because a lot of these high-end universities, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, they are pretty expensive,
Right.
and may not be suitable for a lot of people, and therefore my search was extremely narrowed down by cost and aid and scholarship.
Okay, so narrowing down onto that topic of finance, for a lot of people, a lot of universities are inaccessible because the fees are too high for the way their parents work or the way they work. So was this a factor that you had to consider? And if so, did you apply for aid, and how did that work out for you?
Definitely. It was definitely a factor, as I mentioned earlier. Of course, with COVID, I know a lot of families have been through some pretty tough struggles.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're coming out of it now with, things opening up. But for someone that hasn't, or for someone that it's a big factor of, like it was for me, what you have, again, I can't stress this enough, it's research. You have to look at the different costs that go into living in the United States or wherever else in the world. Most universities have websites, or almost all universities have websites where you can find this information, because they also want to inform future potential students about their costs and stuff like that. So you have to do research in order to find out, the best price for you. But also specifically to the United States, they have a lot of financial aid,
right? Yeah.
and scholarships and other ways to get a lowered tuition price. And it's different for each university, state, city. It's very complicated, and therefore a lot of research, a lot of retention of knowledge has to take place. Also, for division sports, they offer scholarships, not for division 3, but for division 2 and 1. There are athletic scholarships that they can offer. So if your level of sporting is high enough for them, or it passed their threshold for a scholarship application, they might offer you, aid from scholarship money. And then your total, what you have to contribute for university is reduced. But financial aid is a little different, where it's dependent on your family's need.
Okay.
And that means that you submit a bunch of pretty intrusive documents about your family's income, spending, and then they develop an accurate or specific contribution that they think that your family can make for your university over the course of the 4 years, or the how many ever terms you plan to apply for. And then they try and meet you halfway. So if you, for example, I'll give an example. If the cost of attendance is, say, $40,000, if you
for
submit
1 year,
For 1 year, yeah.
Yeah.
Or for, I mean, just as an example, for some term, for some university, the cost of attendance is $40,000. If they decide through all your documents that you can contribute $20,000, a lot of universities have a policy where they will grant the remaining, so they will meet the demonstrated need. So if you need the next $20,000 to attend university, a lot of universities will give you that $20,000.
Right.
They won't give it to you as money, but they will deduct that from the
Cost of living.
cost of attendance.
And tuition, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right. And so moving forward, what about after university? What are your plans, and do you intend to take swimming to a higher level, or you mentioned about being a surgeon, go into further medical education? Because I think, after university, a lot of students work so hard to get to that stage in their lives, and when it's over, they might not have a clue what they want to do. But do you?
I think that's a really valuable question, because it's, I don't know much, but back in the day when you went to university, it would mean something. You'd get a degree, and that meant you automatically got a good job. But nowadays, the degree from university is seen as a baseline, as a minimum requirement for many jobs. And so I think, it's helpful to know what you want to do. Like I said earlier, I want to be a surgeon, and so I know the field or the pathway that I need to take. And just to give you a brief on that, it means that I do university, and then I try to get into medical school.
Right.
And then after that, I am able to practice medicine after I complete a number of certifications. But for a lot of people, pursuing engineering, say you want to become an astronaut, you have to do more research, figure out what requirements you need to get into that field, because there may be certain pathways that you must take, certain subjects that you must take, certain majors you must major in. And so, yeah, it's helpful for me. I knew what I wanted to do, and therefore I know my plan. But a lot of people don't know what they want to do, and the United States, I feel, is good with that. They offer you to go into university undecided until your third year. So that means you have 3 years to decide what you want to do or what you want to get a degree in.
Okay.
And so it's good because they don't expect you to know what you want to do right now. But even if you do decide to major in something, and then after you graduate, you don't know what to do, there's a lot of opportunities for work, not just in the United States, around the world. And I mean, nowadays you can find everything on the internet. You can look up jobs that require, or that you can use your major in. You can look at jobs that have nothing to do with what you studied in university. And I think that is scary, but if you just bog down and do some research, you can find out what you want to do.
And in this particular context, sometimes, at the moment, with the current pandemic, it's quite difficult to find jobs now. People return to their home countries. Did this affect any of your decision making? And if so, what were your considerations, in regards to the pandemic? I know you're not from the United States, are you? So, travel and getting to school, and perhaps returning wherever your family are based, to see them when the semester's finished.
Well, for me, I've been very fortunate. My father is a pilot, and so flying is relatively easy compared to anybody else. I know the cost of flying is extremely high, especially for long distances. Example, Thailand to the United States, it's extremely long and it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
But for me, that is most, if not all, taken care of by my father's job as a pilot. Then, sorry, what was your other question?
So just, did you take into consideration maybe the effects of the pandemic, and,
Right.
Living maybe far away from your family, traveling and when the term time's finished, where do you go if flights aren't available?
Right. So the pandemic definitely made me question what I wanted to do. But since my field was so closely related to it, which and you did hear things about shortages of doctors, shortages of you know hospitals running out of beds, it kind of made me want to pursue my path even more to help, and that's driven by my constant want to be in service to the human race. That's one of my main goals, and then that's why that's what helped me make my decision to become or to pursue a career in surgery and medicine. But for it should definitely impact people's aspirations, but it shouldn't negatively impact them. They should start thinking positively and think look at what's happening in the world right now. I know that there were a lot of giving example of my father, there were a lot of people in his company and other company airlines around the world that got laid off because there was no requirement for pilots anymore. No one was flying. And so this made it extremely difficult for them to find other avenues for jobs and also find other jobs, other airlines that wanted them. So that's definitely a thing to think about. I had a friend who wanted to become a pilot but has now changed their field of study to law because there's no requirement for new pilots anymore and nobody's investing in new pilots. And that may be sad. There might be some big disappointments. But with the world opening back up, there's hope. Airlines are recruiting now, and I'm sure that a lot of other jobs are also hiring now as well. And so I think just keeping aware of the global situation, looking at what fields are doing well, what fields are not doing well. If you don't know what you want to do and you have no dreams or desires to be anything specific, I think that's a great thing. Just keeping knowledgeable, keeping aware of the situation and what's happening and what's not happening.
And when that change of plan occurs, like you mentioned your friend, when you have your heart so set on something and then all of a sudden it's just not applicable anymore, how do you deal with that level of uncertainty? And indeed, in this context, applying for university, if it was your dream to go to this place and all of a sudden you receive a letter of rejection, how do you deal with that change of plan? How do you move forward?
I think it's good to have, there's always going to be rejection. I mean, if not now in university, if not in your exams, or if, something that's happening right now, there'll definitely be some form of rejection that you will go through in your life. And I mean, it's good to prepare for that. So I don't mean by not expecting to do well, but by keeping a level mind and keeping humble. And I think the application process for me definitely humbled me, because I did have to contact a lot of coaches. And for a lot of institutions, for a lot of high-end institutions, my swimming wasn't at the level that they were looking for. And therefore, I was essentially rejected by them. And so that humbled me a lot, because that made me think, okay, I'm not the best, but there were still other universities that were interested in me, other coaches, in having me on their team. And so it's good to have a level mind. So instead of, it's hard not to have dreams and aspirations and not to get excited. But what you have to do is also stay humble and be ready for the rejection. And even if you do get rejected from your top choice, your top university, your dream, it may not be university as well. It may be, career path. You don't get the job you wanted to. I think you take it as a learning experience and you try to move on. You try to see what happened, what were the reasons that you didn't get what you wanted, and try to make it so that those reasons aren't applicable when you apply for the next job or the next university or to the next institution.
Right. So your advice to other students in our school and maybe other schools who are listening, what would your wise counsel be to them for if they're considering applying to university, or just in a context of academics, or perhaps sporting reasons too? What would your advice be to them based on your experience?
So it's a little different for what stage in the process they're already at. If you're listening to this and you're in high school, it may be a lot sooner than you think. It may come a lot sooner than you think. Especially if you're a senior, this is now the times for applications. By senior, I mean year 13.
Yeah.
This is now the time to submit your applications or to start getting your applications finalized. Year 12, it's a little easier for you. You have a little more time, but it's also the time to start thinking about universities more intensely and what you want to do. Year 11 and year 10, right now, the main thing you can do is research. For sporting, you can start contacting coaches, particularly in the United States, because they recruit very early.
Mm-hmm.
And even if there's nothing that can be done now, even if like for sports, I mean, if the coach can't, give you admissions or anything like that right now, you can start having conversations, and this builds your experience, which will then help you in the later years when you've maybe improved in your sporting, or you've submitted your applications and you're looking to get recruited. So for each stage for each like stage of where you are in your university application process, my advice is a little different. But mainly it's just you have to keep active at it, especially for the United States. I mean, it's extremely complicated there. And I'm sure around the world as well, it's not as easy as we think it is. You don't just submit one application with all your achievements and honors, and it's pretty difficult. So you have to keep active and keep researching, keep yourself knowledgeable, keep yourself engaged with what's happening.
Right. So here in BISP, we have many core components of the International Baccalaureate, IB, and one of them is CAS, right? And so we have to complete a creativity, an activity, and a service for 60 hours per strand, which is quite strenuous, but can be done over the course of 18 months. And one of the essentials to pass the CAS is your CAS project, right? And is this something that you worked hard on, to choose something more original or something less commonly done to put on your CV and put forward to the universities and say, hey, I'm different, I'm prepared to do new things, try new things, and take the path less taken?
Definitely. I think universities always want to hear about what's different of you than like from others, because they're gonna have so many applications and so many people with similar interests or similar achievements.
Yeah.
And therefore I think CAS is great from the IB, where you can explore your creative, active, and serviceful sides. And for my CAS project, I did a creative CAS project, so I focused on the creativity strand. And I feel like it was extremely different because a lot of people focus on the service side. They focus on their CAS project as being this big, thing in service to others, and I greatly appreciate that. I think that's amazing. But for me, I was more interested in, developing my creative skills, developing my because I feel like I'm a more creative and critical thinking person. So yeah, and therefore I focused on the creativity strand for my CAS project. But you obviously should think about what might stand out for universities.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to go about your CAS, because it'll help you put interesting things on your CV, on your resumes, on your applications for universities, jobs, etc.
Yeah.
And it might just be a good way for you to engage with the global and local communities and environment.
Right, yes. So thank you for listening to our podcast today. Thank you very much for your time, Armaan. And we look forward to hearing and talking to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.